당한 계신조다 가르치고서는 안에 저기 단 노화세다 디기투비기 탑람디 안에 가르치고서는 저기 낭 삼리토네 안에 지금 교화당하지 삼릉 엠비릭이 파봉 안에 삼로 지 펜베릭 안에 개외지 삼로야 뭐 공원에 공도 폐 당지 나 공제 공부를 당하지는 디기투고래 해서지 동화세야다 디기투고래 해서지 어데스네 먼저 디슈로.
Yes, yesterday, as in the preceding days, we've continued to look at the method to achieve a state of lasting happiness, freed of all suffering, which depends on transforming our way of thinking through habituating ourselves ever more to virtuous or beneficial ways of thinking. We separate ourselves from the contrary, opposite ways of thinking. And in this way, we develop our mind and eventually attain the state of lasting happiness.
상한생 망고 휴주어데 로드베네 레가 망보레 뇨다 사고레 데네기 토네 아니지 이제 생규 토네 니소자 마라 고야당 지금 미기 통야랴 직다 마라 통야 안지 취제자라로서 바다 데네기 토네 배 상한생이다 지금 뭐 레가 망보 상한생 뇨다 사고 휴지나네 취되어와 데네기 예비 갑텔이야 양아 지금 삼르단항에 토네 아니지 강아세야다 데네기레스 강아세야다 디기투베지 간스 투고르선 다가서 가상 개인의 쉬바디 디레 대체상아서 삼르다위 토네 소소기 삼르인 냠는 집이 토네 아니 데니기 상아세다 뇨다서고 아니 레가 망보 디네 유디갑라 마서 두신의 삼르다제 인지게 디기투고레 동아세고 그레스 데니 삼다베는 다가서 셈랴 체데리이네야 안 셈르려다 디기야다 뭐바네 개와 치마이네 아니 야고용투야 안 탈바다 템지기 몇고가 토투야게 람 냠는지다 림바디 텐데시에서는 가서 가상 큰이네 시에디게 자사 온도시는 쉬버로다.
The various methods for transforming one's mind that we have looked at, these present the complete and unmistaken method to attain a state of lasting happiness. But to embark on this process where one commits to focusing on what is of great meaning beyond just the immediate experiences of one's life, this is quite difficult. There are many obstacles which hinder us from being able to embark on this process of being concentrated on our mental transformation. These we can, you'll have a far more experience of that than I do, in that in general people's lives are extremely busy. It feels as if there is no free time, that there are so many demands on us for our time, for our energy, leaving very little time to ourselves to engage in reading and reflecting on what we're reading, or attending retreats and reflecting here. So these you know very well. For example, to the extent that one watches news, this often has quite an impact on one's mind, leading one to be quite concerned and to worry and consume ever more. Likewise, modern technology, this has been designed in a way to encourage engagement. And therefore, interacting with modern technology is not only very easy, but we experience it as pleasurable, as desirable, and also attach meaning to it. So in this way, our time gets consumed. Our mental energy in particular gets consumed, and leaving us to feel we have no time for anything else. So the way to deal with this is precisely these trainings that have been presented, which serve to make one's mind expansive and broad, seeing what and leads us to reevaluate what is truly important. And it's through this process of re-evaluation that one turns away from what currently seems of overriding importance to focus what, in the longer term, is truly of importance.
세델리아 안지 계획 자와 강투도 주긴 선비게다 만절리아 계획 자와 주바나 인디게네 세대치니까래 팽교래 제가 다 디바사바나 세대치를 뉴고르 디네산데 계획 자와 강투도 주긴 선비게 다 삼로티 타야 되시로와 다 니베델은 어저 둘둘둘 삼다베네 제가다 대화세대 랑나제 대화 되바데 현처산 대화 되바 지바데 제가 심지어 탐제 대화대 대한국도 템퍼쇼 선배가 삼라다제 되네 니바들라 샘제 탐제 동화다 자워쇼 선배기 니제곰 되네 좀 되네 시바들라 되네 샘제 탐제 동화다 자와나 디기도 두바디 탑람디 베즈디 겐지기 선배기 온도시네 안데 제 삼라다 안디제라 아니 샘제 탐제기 돈달라야다 동화 심제 현유 동화세 디기 주야게 탑람이 약쇼데 상예고 말이죠. 지장의 상예고 마톱는데 지금에도 시 상예고 탑으로 선배게다 삼다이데 자주 샘삼나 나제 다 되네 상예고 토비 치르도 안 동화 탑에 규비 뉴바디 술을 겸내 건조스는 겹지 건조스는 껴그레 선배게 겸로 삼다 되네 아능아 저기 릉아 이스미요관에 샬라 리비 자와다 가야 지금에 세배게다 가지고 릉아 이스미 예주던 배 돈바스 지금의 세배도 돈바지 삼 되네 삼다 얘네 안에 류롱제 계속다지 봐 삼제 샬레야 봐 안에 당기 선배게 야 건축을 추고 부게 샤 심절 봐 당기 선배게 또 진배기 냠내 삼다 디제라 되는 가지고 다 지게 세델리아 안지 내나서나 가리토네 강아 망부용을 취해 냠내 제바이 나제 계획 냠내 제바 샬로 로버 제베네 강아 망부여 강아 차상 안에 지 가르 여베능이 안젤레 셈 마추바체 안지 셈 마슌바체 되기 셈베게다 수베냐네 데네 게외 자와 데네 자야베 빼 약고레 다 데네게 ዣ레 판도자다 게외냐네 약보슈 게디네 무디네 지긴 셈베 삼다 전주게 삼다 차 어두스제는 아주게 삼다에 림바디 두스제는 림바준데 데네게 삼마지게디나 제데네 담베네 그 빙아도 두스네 삼다베드 바슈 직스 데스 삼다 로베네 호가망아 주스나레 바차야 안데네 마지네 어소소게 두실로 빠베기 균링데 삼다제 두실 데스레레당 야가망아 요나 아니 자주 셈데게 균링하고 거미야 잠니제되게 균링하고 거미야 삼다 데네 야 두실 뇨노지나 안데네게 두실 dorduche komyada chisada nga zuki samlo nangla jangdur chege rimbadi direda kasa kisinje rimbadi sanyo ko ba rimbadi ha ko ba che ko ha ko ne ne nyamne che ko re sonso chisada rimbadi do suste ane dine zada rimbadi dine zada ga rimbadi jonga do sin samlo ba jangdur chege da dire zo direda nga zum
to be able to free up time for yourself to overcome this busyness of one's life. This can be done through going through these stages of meditation, in particular those foundational levels, which will serve for us to re-evaluate what is of primary importance, where we should be putting, in particular, our mental energy. In this way, we'll come to see what is distracting us and thereby consuming our time, and what is actually beneficial to put our time and mental energy into. So therefore, initially, whilst these foundational meditations are crucial throughout training, in particular at the beginning, however, the entire sequence together serves to help us re-evaluate what is important. So therefore, I'd encourage you to engage in the entire sequence of meditations, because depending on your own disposition, varying parts of the meditation will draw you more and have an outsized impact on your motivation. So to review the steps, most of the steps then briefly, to generate the determination that it's imperative that I spend what remains of this life developing virtuous ways of thinking, in other words, accumulating virtue, and turning away from non-virtuous ways of thinking and behaving, such as the afflictions. One engages in the meditations on the impermanence of this life. Thereafter, one recognizes that all beings are in the same position as I am. There is no difference between us. I now have come to recognize this. So this is of great benefit to myself. I've come to recognize the impermanence of this life. So there's a great benefit that comes to me. Others don't yet know this. May they come to know this. May they have this knowledge and thereby be able to progress to freedom. So here we're generating a caring attitude, a tender and close attitude to others. And this is the mind of love. Then we can follow it with its companion, the mind of compassion. And by doing so, may all beings free themselves completely from the causes that would lead to suffering. This way we generate compassion. Then the third meditation in this section is that of generating the altruistic attitude of universal responsibility, where we say, it's not enough that I merely wish for this, no matter how sincere it may be. I need to help others. It is my responsibility to guide others, to develop the causes that will lead to happiness and abandon the causes that will otherwise lead to suffering. And then the fourth step in this part of the meditation is that we recognize that in reality right now, even with those that we have a close connection with, who will trust us and listen openly to what we have to say, we cannot yet guide them well. We lack the knowledge and the integration of that knowledge. But the being who has done this perfectly is a Buddha. So I need to strive to become a Buddha as quickly as possible so that I can become a skilled guide. And knowing that as I progress in my spiritual development, throughout these stages, I will be of ever more benefit to others. But when I become a perfected being, then I'll really be able to help others perfectly in accordance with their own individual karmic backgrounds and spiritual dispositions. I must become a Buddha for the sake of others. So here we have generated bodhicitta. And then we can go for refuge through recognizing the incredible qualities of the Buddha jewel, Dharma jewel, and Sangha jewel. Then we come to the next part of the meditation, which is that of the six perfections. So the first four of these are ethics, where, in brief, we commit to not harm others through cultivating our mind. So we commit here to live in accordance with our vows, utilizing the vows to restrain our mind and thereby our behavior, physical and verbal behavior. The second training is that of generosity, which, like all of these trainings, these are mental trainings. We develop or train our mind to give to others. To give to others, we can express this materially, we can express this through physical behavior, and we can express this through verbal communication. Third training is that of patience. And patience, it's a mental training. So it's a mind that is undisturbed in the face of any form of adversity. So whether that adversity is coming from external to us, how people perhaps interact us, or when we're trying to help them, if they show ingratitude or they want to take advantage of us, our mind stays undisturbed, not overwhelmed by this. Likewise, if we're experiencing physical illness or our own inner turmoil, our mind stays undisturbed, not overwhelmed by this. Or thirdly, whilst engaged in the Dharma practice, we will encounter obstacles, but not allowing our mind to be overwhelmed by this. Then the fourth training is that of joyous perseverance, which is that of taking delight in what we're doing, intentionally generating a joyous attitude towards the virtuous activities we're engaging in, delighting in the time we've made to meditate, delighting in our interactions with others that have been beneficial, delighting even when there have been some difficulty, generating joy in our endeavor that we tried. So these then are the first four of the trainings of a bodhisattva. And the way to bring about mental transformation is, there are two aspects to this. One is to accumulate knowledge and to, whilst accumulating that, integrate it through meditation. And the second aspect is to do these two, accumulation of knowledge and integration through meditation, repeatedly over a sustained period. So here I want to make another key point. In order to experience, or in order to discover that one actually has far more time than is visible at the moment, one needs to engage in this meditation repeatedly, because in this way it will start to have ever more of an impact on one's mind, and thereby what one values, what one sees as important, will start to shift. But this requires sustained meditation. So whatever inspiration has been found on this retreat, to take it into your daily life. So if you have just 5 minutes in the morning, that is sufficient. Do just 5 minutes every day. And if you can do 10, that is even better. Just in the way that it has been presented here, you can go through this thought process in any physical posture, whether it's seated or any other. Go through this thought process, and then thereby doing it every day, one is doing it repeatedly over a sustained period. And when one has more time, perhaps on the weekend, then certain aspects of this meditation, those that one is more drawn to, one can spend more time cultivating those within oneself, such as love, compassion, bodhicitta. And in this way, one trains one's mind by going through this process repeatedly over a sustained period. And occasionally then one will have the opportunity to read or to attend further teachings, and thereby add to one's well of knowledge, which aids the integration through meditation.
심전도 산요 고방 토르쇼스 배장주 셈치 삼다메나 데니 삼던데 델이야 아니 아주 산계를 미치 대바 제지도 미치 아니 제지도 내게 딩해진 고미하다 디면나 야지 수수결에 장주 셈계 셈자 산요 고방 토르쇼 셈베 삼로디 파 예주제 안 디파 안식 마양와지 제지도가 제네도도 제도시네 안도시 직되어있나 되네 와지 딩해진 고미하리야 직 차고 디자인에 주야게 레라줘야게 되네 차고래 안 되네야 도시네 되네야 저기야 저게 제바로 제도 레가 가르네 되는 아세다 지금 소소야 삼로 나와 나신지 따다 차기되에 민도 지치상 가리 현차상 아주 통시수 유배 차상 규단建了 되는 뒤지기 규단 建了 되는 라바라바다 하고도 되는 마 참아 정말 저기 아주 개월 삼다외네 나 가와 개와서 아말에 개월 아미기 나라야 간스기도 수심버림바제 되네야 아니 개와 치만 마 용화래 세대 되니기 제바제네 되네 간섬질이야 안저 나 세디 가라야 되바 마되바 랑원이 주바 두고 민도 제바제네다 나 세디 간섬질이야 두 제전데 나 세디 보랑기 풍부가 뭐 강르시 바 되지 뢰 다바이메 동토 그래제 되니기 제바제데 조신의 동반이 야 땡지게 남자 삼당 동반이를 제바제의 최고래서 온도 진행한 삼당도 내야고 그래서 그래.
In a previous session, I mentioned that there are two forms of meditation. There's the analytical meditation, which is where we're thinking, we're using our intelligence. So what I've presented here in this summation, all of that is analytical meditation, because one is analyzing, reflecting, investigating. The second type of meditation is placement meditation, or concentration meditation. But placement meditation is where one places one's mind on an object. That's all. The analytical meditation is where one analyzes the object, the particular subject matter. So when you have more time, then I'd encourage you to combine these two forms of meditation. When you don't have so much time, just do the analytical. When you have more time, do the placement meditation. Placement meditation is where one places one's mind on an object. And one can do so on any virtuous object. So usually the text always encourages one to choose a Buddha image. And when he visualizes a Buddha image, places one's mind on the Buddha image. But the truth is, one can utilize any object that one is inclined to. So for example, in the Analytical Meditation, when one feels an impact on one's mind from the process of analysis. For example, if powerful love arises within oneself, place your mind on that love. So love, it's a consciousness. So the object is a consciousness, and you now just abide on this consciousness of love. Maybe compassion, or maybe bodhicitta, the determination to become a Buddha for the sake of others. When this arises within oneself, one feels this the presence of this consciousness, one can place one's mind on that. And if one then has the time, because very quickly one will lose the object, then one regenerates it through analysis, and again places one's mind. And the process that one is engaging in here is through strengthening our consciousness, that is called meditative stabilization. Generally we'd call it concentration itself. So we're strengthening this consciousness, and then eventually, when we have far more time, we can focus on achieving single-pointed concentration. And all this training over the weeks or the months or the years prior, we would have been strengthening this consciousness that will eventually develop into single-pointed concentration. So this meditation then, of concentration, you can do when you have more time. And the second one to do when you have more time is the meditation, the analytical meditation of wisdom, where one takes any object, but in particular the self, and investigates how the sense of self appears, to come to recognize that it appears as if it is independent, self-existent, existing by way of its own nature. In other words, nothing impacts on it, because it is independent of influence by anything else. Something that exists as a standalone from our physical and mental aggregates, our body and mind. So one can investigate, first see how it appears, then ask oneself, does it exist in this way or not? So in this process of investigation, there's also a lot to be said, but just in brief. If the self existed independently, it would mean it had always existed. It would not require causes. But we know our self-required causes, our parents, our consciousness. So therefore it cannot exist in this way. So therefore we recognize it cannot exist independent, but is dependent. So how then does it exist in reality? Because the way it appears is not how it exists, is that it exists merely labeled by mind onto these aggregates, onto the body, onto the mind. It only exists in this way, not as an independent, self-existent entity. So there's a lot to say on this meditation, but in brief, one can reflect on the wisdom aspects of the path when one has more time.
Ani ngaranzo kanga karliyo sanganzo ne soro tyodo so soro ya manyo ba ine ya an jishanda ki mishanda shanji le jawang dang ba shanji le kanga te ba se de shanji le ji de ne ge kanga te ba ji tong ne su sengyu tong a da tyo ba tyodo ngazo samna la khala go san lamsa ti jawang dang ha da shan le tubje da kanga te mi ji ti so ya be dugja re sam be lamsa ngaranzo ki samna na la ya konzole gyuen da ya jong kong la ya ki nyanga chimuchi yungorwa chesa di konto labaina nga jole dibosa gore chesa chida konto lagyo mar dibosa gyo mar singa juda ta nyamlen jiya de kanso ke shedu dibosa gyo mar konto lagyo mar sigorwa dene zan dene nga gar samdang gorasun dene ki shengi shenjile tubje ta na kanga teba be chik dene ki teba thondu lamsa gar samdang gorasun 미디 독자에서 코로 말아와셔 아니 닝제 선비게 곧 디미디 투제 땅의 미디 뇨모베시 되샤야는 되샤게 오시 상황도 송와 야네 코로게 상황도 송와래 제가 코로 뇨모베 상황도 송베 제라 안 레가디 두가지마도 야가지요 말했어 제가 닝제 콜카 곧 미디 뇨모베시는 상황 송와래 닝제다 콜리아 코로나에 강아 Shanley to the Tango there, Corolla Ganga bottom of Yore, she said, Ninja, Sembe, Tesuyan, Dunga, Jana, Zimbig Ninja, Sembe, some Tavina, Colia Ninja Gombaina, Mazulia, and Condlango Mare, Chesade, Ninja Gomedu, Gawaki Yongore. Gawara, Coral and the Digora. Chesa de Neo Condolaya get Sabla, Nijigomba, Gawar to go. Chesa Ganga Lam the Jua said, the negative contract, Nomo, but Ganga Divasa Deneledu, Sosuke, Nijigombaina, the Nikish of Trotoba, Chesa Ganga Lam the Juas. Dinashi and social mission that you social yam. Then I Govun G did 2 mother chane, mission de social six of Shevada, Namju Bada, Anching and the Legaro, Lega Robada, and Dina the Bombotiki, Sosolia, the Stonjo Dia, Diazic, the Negi Udicabla, Lamsa, the Lamsang on the same Jumja Gangata, Makibasha, Nangachimborua. The Negaba Carson wasn't what the Konzuki shared the Konzuina, a tick. Mala to Sheva Jebati, controlla Duja Sheva 67, Yomo Bashana Shawas or Rayo Mare, Ninjas and Bendigo Shabana, and the Delia Conraki Humare. She said, Ninja, that is Ninjas, the Corona de Audugore, or they were the Dena, said because do the tower, Jana, Bear, Woodwa, some Nijicomba, the Cola Jamba, the Nijicom Shabana, Manzulia, Controlla, Yomo Baki, Sabla, Nekawasa Gore, Chezangazuki. Similar, no more by Jana as a Ganga Tiggerwa. She did Ninja Gomna as a Ganga Moba, she's a Ganga Lam the Kava. Ninja Gomiodum, there is a Vachili or a cousin Ninja some do call Pa Koromala Bache, same tempuji to a Chago, Swabian and Liwara. The name is under the neck of the Ya and the Ninja Jambata, Ninja Gom Shabana, and the Ganga Lam Sangasi, the neck of the Ya, Dusin in your Raya de Cabla, Ninja Gom to Baina, Lamsa Dinesam Nadobaina, and this or an Angazulia, giving Yamlin. Ganga Lam to Kawasach. Yan Gabriel Angazuke Jalala Soba Laba, and Kumashoa La Soba de Negi, Yungurua, the Negablada, Chikseju Tange Ravana de Tigorwa, the Kisi Raya Meva, and Pando Meva Chavaina, and Desuya, that Tangi Jalala, Songi Chola, Droson, some big Kumasha, some Diana, some Dana, the Nigger Jala, the Raya Meva Chilia, Ganga Chair, Sosulia, Semakiwa Chai, Shuchesh to Gore. Chizan the Negabla, the Nishio, and Lamsa. Karasam Dangos, oh, that immediately Tinguma Hedi, Koraya, Gugor, Kanga Chigor, Pay, Yapores, Pandona, Yawashuria, and Ekoronia, Nedi, Jimba in Sambig, Korola Tongue, Semba, Dushin, Jimba sometimes, Nita Korona, Pandoja, Yawa, Show, Sembe, sometimes, Nicolia, Jimba in that Korea, Pandoja, Corona, Ganga, Setuba, Yong, Show, sometimes Shavina. The Ganga Lam the Kaware, Carson, Dang, simple stop at Tabla, and it could don't Samba, Jimba, Jam, Ninja, some don't Samba Comshadu, Sosolia, some Shishi, Chayachida, and Sosugi, the need don't Samba, the Jam Ninja Combat, Gawacha, Chesade, Ganga Lam the Kawa says. Do some Dana, the dinner, some Tavene, as a Ganga Mionwa, Sosugi, Diva Masaba, Sosu di Sablia, and Gawaya was out to Vadi, Yungo Resh, that and Azugeda, some Nutanang, Done, Ganga Seta. Digi Tubtadi, and a chick do still Yungo Vesa, do some Tabena, and said Delia, Susu symbol that Dikioya, and D. Jebudi, Yawachima, and Yabuya, do Yungo said, the net idea, sometimes they get him with Chawars.
A further point to make, in particular on how to make use of the teachings that you've received here in your own daily life, is that, and that this benefit comes as a consequence of not merely hearing these teachings and engaging in the meditations here, but through building on that and engaging in these meditations repeatedly over a sustained period, even if it is just a few minutes every day. So as one's mind becomes more habituated to the way of thinking, these virtuous ways of thinking of the Dharma, and again remembering this word habituated or familiarized is the same meaning as meditation. So as one's mind is becoming more integrated with the virtuous minds of the Dharma, these minds more readily arise within oneself. They don't need to be initially, they certainly need to be intentionally generated, but it's easier to do so. Later, through training repeatedly over a sustained period, they will become second nature, part of who you are, which means they'll naturally arise. And this is an incredible benefit, because to the extent that one's mind is dominated by the afflictions, life is difficult. Life really is difficult. Because those around us in society, their minds largely are overwhelmed by their afflictions, and therefore, without much provocation, over things of very little significance in the grand scheme of things, they can blow up. They can treat each of us in a way that is unwarranted and is quite abusive. So this may happen in one's family life, amongst friends, amongst strangers, in one's place of work. So these are situations that everyone has encountered so many times. The way that someone who is training well in this, or is training repeatedly over a sustained period, because what I want to make clear is what I'm going to describe here is something that is accessible to everyone as long as they train every day, because that is the process that makes these trainings second nature. So let's take an illustration. Anyone, gives you a hard time. Usually it involves them talking to one in an abusive manner. They could be particularly rude, they could be looking down on you. In particular, if it's someone who has power or authority over you, such as an employer, or it could be someone that you have a connection, a relationship with, or someone that's unknown to you, whomever it is. Take an illustration of when they talk to one in a way that is unwarranted, unpleasant. The usual way of responding is to see this person as a bad person, an awful person, and to see their words in the same light. If someone has trained well now in the Dharma, that natural way of responding will have been replaced with another way of responding. Initially, it will need to be intentionally generated. Later, it will arise spontaneously. And this way this Dharma way of responding can be any of the meditations that have been described. But I'll use primarily the one of patience, but it could be any. So someone who's trained well in patience will have also trained well in the preceding stages. So they therefore will have a good understanding of the workings of their own mind, and they will know that their mind is not unique. Other people think and therefore act in a similar way. So now the person who is well trained will hear these harsh words from someone. They will experience the arisal of their own anger pushing back against this person. And they will know anger that's arising in their mind is an affliction. It is causing me to suffer right now. And to the extent it arises and is enacted, will cause me to suffer more. I need to stop this. So immediately the person is on guard, having recognized that their arisal of anger is the enemy to deal with. The way they'll deal with it is to recognize that this person before them, they are right now overwhelmed by their afflictions. They have no control. They are speaking to you without freedom. They are actually not doing so intentionally, even if it is planned. They are talking in this way because they are overwhelmed. They have lost control. Their afflictions have overwhelmed them. It could be an affliction of attachment, where they are attached to having things go their way, and therefore they're speaking in an inappropriate manner. It could be coming from pride and arrogance, and therefore they're talking down to you. It could be coming from anger. Whichever it is, actually, from your side, from the meditator's side, it's of no importance. The mere recognition that this being is without control. They have been overwhelmed by the afflictions, and they therefore are suffering. If one has trained well in patience, one will have also trained well in love and compassion. One will not want this being to suffer. One will not want this being to suffer. So immediately compassion arises in the mind of the practitioner of patience for this suffering mother being, wanting them not to suffer. And one will also recognize, because of one's prior meditations, that not only are they suffering now, but they are creating the causes to suffer further in future lives. This too then adds to the compassion arising. So now, your mind as the meditator, in the face of this adversity, this angry or arrogant or attached person, your mind is not afflicted, it's not angry. Why? Because compassion and patience has arisen. Your mind is virtuous, you are accumulating virtue, but this person before you is suffering. Now you are able to respond in a skillful way, because, here's the definition of patience, your mind is undisturbed in the face of adversity. And rather than being disturbed, compassion has arisen. Now one can respond compassionately, skillfully, in a way appropriate to that situation. So this is how one takes adversity and transforms it into the path to enlightenment. In other words, a situation that would previously had led to you creating the causes to be born, causes to suffer. Rather, one is taking that exact same situation and through skillful means, one is transforming it into virtue, transforming what would have been non-virtuous into virtue, which leads to enlightenment. So this is how one transforms problems into the path. So this technique can be applied to any situation. So in this illustration I've used for how someone talks to one, can be used for how people physically interact with one, how they perhaps look at you or whatever it may be. Or it can be used perhaps if someone steals from you, takes something that you value, whether a material possession or something else. So here too, the process is identical. You recognize the arisal of the affliction in your own mind in response to what has happened. You know that this affliction will lead to you suffering now and accumulating the causes for suffering. So you rather deal with it skillfully by, if it involves another person, allowing compassion to arise for them and thereby being patient. Or another, of course, again, this practice of patience should be conjoined or is conjoined with all of these trainings. One can generate the understanding of impermanence, that this particular situation is fleeting, it's not of much value. Or one can generate generosity and think, if this person wants something from me, let them have it. It has no intrinsic value of its own. It is impermanent, it is fading away anyway. If they want it, and they seem to really need it, let them have it. If that eases their suffering, let them have it. Because they matter to me. This is the altruistic attitude. They matter to me. And if by them taking whatever it is from me, eases their suffering, brings them some happiness, causes their afflictions to diminish, let them have it. In this way, again, your mind is virtuous. It's calm, it's peaceful. And again, the definition of patience. Your mind is undisturbed in the face of adversity. And here, you've accumulated vast stores of merit through the arisal of patience, compassion, and the practice of generosity. So the way that one is able to transform problems of any type into the path comes about independent, gathering knowledge, and integrating that knowledge. And repeatedly over a sustained period, gathering knowledge, and repeatedly over a sustained period, integrating that knowledge. And in this way, one becomes more habituated to these virtuous ways of thinking. And then when one encounters adverse circumstances of any type, initially, with intention, with vigor, one generates the virtuous minds. as one becomes ever more familiar, they start to, with these virtuous ways of thinking, they start to arise spontaneously in an uncontrived manner within oneself.
That in my, that's all the answer. That sometimes that the shubati, Kasankin shubata, that shubati, Tahara, the Zoyam and Jeding. That is so sometimes my dedication, Jena, Jigorwa, Yaji Paso Kora Rodio, to combat a Rodio Kala, Chamian Rodio Kala, do some Dana Jigorwa.
Sorry, as a translator, I missed one illustration again I gave earlier, so I'll give that now, as well as what he just said. So in these examples of problems that one encounters and takes on the path, another one I'd encourage you to look at is how one interacts with at the news or situations in the world. Because when one observes things that are not in accordance with one's own way of seeing, unhappiness arises. And often this unhappiness can be really powerful. So through any of these techniques, transform this arisal of an affliction, because often it may come with anger or pushing against certain individuals, transform that into the path. One can recognize that what is disturbing you doesn't disturb others. Therefore, the situation, this view one has, cannot exist in the way that it appears. That's one technique. Another would be compassion for those involved, and so forth. But utilize what when one observes things in the world, be aware of your inner process, transform that into the path in the way presented earlier. So these techniques that are presented right now and in the former segments, these show how what I mentioned in our very first session together, that our attainment of happiness and our overcoming of suffering primarily is dependent not on the material world, but on our way of thinking. Through transforming our way of thinking, whatever we encounter, we do not need to suffer because of it. And here, because life is so busy, I encourage you, again, to reflect in this way repeatedly. One does not have to do this just on a cushion. That is the prescribed measure. But skilled meditators will take time throughout the day just to think. Because these meditations are thinking. And one thinks throughout the day. One thinks in one's kitchen. One thinks in one's car. One thinks whilst having a meal. At all these times, one can do this meditation. One does not have to be sitting quietly. There can be activity around oneself, and instead of getting lost in regular thoughts, engage in this meditation. This serves to habituate, familiarize oneself to this. And that is a skillful way to quickly deepen these ways of thinking into one's heart.
That in my Cedung Dini Lotion Yu Zamba, Gandar Jekan Chi, Dendi Chik, Drudare in a level some Daljurinchin, Donlo Maji Exer.
Coming to the 12th verse. This life is so brief, like a flash of lightning. With whatever you do, today is the time to accomplish your future everlasting happiness. Reflect on this well. Do not leave this precious opportunity, this human life, empty-handed.
통로에 배 로시세데 저기 차버저르제 남갈이야 로 큐도아 제대로 대가서 까고 큐전 남상서로도 언디나시 뒤주 통로를 지레서 올다 아주 체디 데닉삼단 체디 뒤주 통로에 엔디 하바도 저기 미리 된데 토와데 뒤주 유점 통로 지레서 제사다 가다르 제견 치기 데 데디직서로 제산다 가르쳐베네 체링부이나다 통도이나다 가리네 개발하면 이내양 제어거에 대해 가르치네 깨와치마 띠 약보 용하야기 깨와치말레 디기 용하야기디 아주 두고 그래서 다시 세들레 통통지나 디덴을 두고 그래서 안에 마음바나 탈바다 땡기 대와 깨와치마다 땡기 대와 탈바다 탐지 캠비 고방 토외기 탑란 람 냠는디 아주 다데네 두고 그래서 강다라 제가 치기 땡디 지 둡뒤들이 인도 레버섬 제가 디니기 두베 냠는 두베기 뒤서디 데링레스 다 뒤서 통도지나다 링보이나다 강따라야 저기 깨와치마 디기 두베아레 타바다 탐제 김보 고방토 냠는 제 림바디 데링이 뒤서래 데링이 두고 그래서 두고 그래 데네 이제 데네게 삼다제 안도시네 두고 그래서 둡뒤 데링이 인도 레버섬
This life is so brief, like a flash of lightning. With whatever you do, today is the time to accomplish your future everlasting happiness. Reflect on this well. The meaning of this will be abundantly clear by now. So these are the foundational meditations that we started the text with, where we recognize that an average lifespan in Australia is in the mid-80s. Some live a bit less than that, some a bit more. From that, we can guess at what may lie before us. But depending on one's age now, and certainly if one is young, will have heard it from others. When some years have passed, people talk about how this life has already passed, like a flash of lightning. This we need to think about. It may well match our own experience, or if not yet, we will hear this from others. This life, when we look back, we see how quickly it has passed. When we imagine about the years and decades before us, that way of thinking leads to procrastination. But if we are of a certain age, we can look back and recognize it really is passing fast. Think on this well, think of it again and again, because recognizing the great value that this life has, but that it is not only finite, but it is ending soon, serves to challenge us to look at what we value and what we prioritize, and will serve to make us recognize that where we put our time and our energy, in particular our mental energy, is almost entirely so as to achieve pleasures which are also brief and fleeting, like a flash of lightning, or to overcome problems, which too are brief and fleeting, like a flash of lightning. So if you look back at your life, at the pleasures you strove for, the problems you strove to overcome, whilst dominating one's mind at the time, almost all of them we can't remember. Think like this. See what is of value, of true value. And in this way, use whatever remains of this life to accumulate the causes for future everlasting happiness. And those causes are all the practices that have been laid out, and the way to accumulate them is to do the reflections, gather more knowledge and reflect repeatedly over a sustained period. So this needs to be reflected on well, because that serves us to reprioritize.
dine zada daljo rinjin tonglo majiang sedoda dang 저기 다댕아 저기 제자 개와 치마다 탈바다 탐지 김 주위에기 띵 개바진 띵 될이야 주부에나 가래 냠내 제나 제투에기 띵 개바진 레디어레스 제자 달주기 리디에서 차도여레 제자 띵 될이야 나도 개와 치마 하다 미고바 투여 디기 주위에기 유주베네 띵 될로 주투고래 탈베 고바 토여기 띵이 되와 탈바세 토여기 유 냠내 제바네 띵 될을 지투고래 산지 고바 토비기 냠내 제바네 띵 될을 지투고래 제자 아주 띵디베 마세 자 첨보지다 예 첨보지 우치 차도여레 달주기 띵 제스 제자 띵 될라 데니기 띵디 여베갑려야 냠내 마체바 있는다 아니 좀 아주 용시우라고 그래 마오바나 데니기 제 마체마도 바제 아니 마오바나 둔로다 니 나선 계산바네 dini 제투에 띵 거로요 말했어. 세상 고급라고 말. 다들 고급 야고로 봐도 안디 고급도 철라마다 님는 제오리에서 다저 베나서다 베레 린진 동로 마지양스데 배낭아 지금 지금 지식 망고 휴직 당한 주다 지금 세라당 외다 도시 팔아 되네 유익질 봐 지도시 다 결혼 디까지 케네 케쇼스 디링키에 고급이 현대 산인 바키에 고급 세베나 당한 된마 조제 사지들레제 안 지게 제모라제 고고제 아니 주주조대 수 강야 케마주 로용베나 디네 동로쇼를 파 로데 동바로 강야 케마 조로와 수롱 용대 강야 케마메 동바치 용고를 어디 동로서 디네 지교 말해서 디네 지교 말해 디나시 베디나시 나즈다 다들 땡텔이야 대위 땡상 배 야고도 땡텔이야 나즈기 개조 누바 가리 좀나 주의기 고갑지 해봐디 안에 다 매버 마두바체 안파 시송바는 동벌로로 받지 지바 체거레스 되네 마제스 지나다 땡텔이야 강 툭툭 냠는 강 툭툭 소소 배저 강 툭툭 제야디 개치 뭐 지고레스 송거래.
In the final line in the verse, do not leave this precious opportunity, this human life, empty-handed. Here, we're recognizing that this life we have has so many, such potential. And this is the crucial prerequisite to understand, to reflecting on its impermanence. What is possible with this life? With this life, unlike in other realms, we can achieve all the qualities of the path, attain freedom from suffering, even enlightenment. It is the indispensable basis for rapid spiritual development. And we have achieved all 18 of the freedoms and endowments. This is something of great benefit. And there's an analogy presented in the text which is very useful to recall in meditation. If one were given the opportunity to perhaps go to a mine, and you are told there's an abundance of precious jewels here, take what you want. But your opportunity is just today. Come today and take as much as you want. No one in their right mind would say, oh, thank you so much. Today I'm a little busy, so I'll pass on it. No one would say that. But that is actually the situation that one is in. We all hold within our hands the precious jewel of human intelligence. And with this life, these freedoms and opportunities, this precious opportunity, this human life, this is the jewel that we hold in our hands. How we utilize it, this is up to us. How we utilize it, this is up to us. And if we utilize what remains of this life well, we will close the possibility of falling into the low realms where spiritual development is not possible. We will close the possibility to dying with regret, knowing that we used this final chapter of our lives well.
니엘네 저기 제리시 와야 돼 계치무차기도 배낭아 저기 두시네 땡아 저기 레가지 갈래 가서 지미 상하진 욕다 소우나라 레가지 조고 에베나 당보 마로니엘네 아 디링된 마 레가 저도 날야 안 욕라 시간 망불리기리 안주 넘유등에 망불리기리 되네 용시버레 지사 되네기 강아치네 델량의 코로 말라와치 파 잠단 인지 공투바 지기 아 선배 삼다야치다 이 쇠보 공투바 지기 세비 삼로디 아주 녀레네 장도를 제베이네 안에 고디 견삼디 디 안에 뒤수텔이야 되네지 강아체나 남산녀야 녀마 삼다와서 디 잼베 젠제 잔투야기 젠제나 라슈게 젠제네 텔레스보 공투야다 잠니지 공투야데 용거로와 되네 장아 주기 녀레네 아주 강아 메디컬 단 강아 유디급라 녀레네 공심마지나 강아 유디급 남상 젠투야디깔에 하보래 진짜 되네서 녀레네 강아 마체 녀레네 아주 되네 주낭에 되네 지기야 되네 준데 되네 지기야 선배게 삼로데 곰바스웨나 아니디 되네게 체여도 갑라 남사 안지가 니지 공투야다 쇠보 공투야 개발용 거래 배낭아 저기 지게 되네게 당아 주주제 되네 띠르카리아로 त्यां사데 되네 뒤서 야보여로와 냐마 메디캅리아 쇼고용 오부시 랑제 조고에나 딱 원단 예디캅네야 Sanyi dini chuzi dini lang choguye, dini langinda sembege, Gwanda Nidi Kablia, Samlo Nale, dini Samlo Pembash Danchi, Yebene, Sanyu Showe Delia, Ni Joa Meva, Nako Tusu Dela Tata, or Ni Seungdua, Jedi Suga Hagurwa, Dinigi, and the Carson, Samlo Pemba Nabi, Nube Digi, Koti Tugorwa. Nayajic, Diniga Samlaga Meva, and Dusi Nedivene. Gabriel Dini says here, Gabriel Dusu in choosing Yun, Mother Imaseva, and then you coach Imasa Yungdua. Geneza, some Pembat Naba and then Pembe di Topi, and then Manzuki, Dot Dusutil Tata Letuba that you were. Dinashing Azuki, Yamlin Gina Sambiki, May Shale, Jamini Gomgi, getting Dusu no Gomgi, Chanchusum Gomi, Sayoko Toba, Jigin Sambiki, Jazada Kewa Dugi Sambiki, some Pembat Nava, Digi Gulongi Tone, and Azuki. Antige Mahobane, Yamlinchi, Tuya, and Gobra, Shibukia, Chungurba. Benanga the Dirwa, the Hawachilia, Sajipe, Yawaning Jubo, that's a good jiggy drosser, champion drosser, Yawashu or some, and some Langanimichi Deli, Tuya, some big, some logic, Yubaina, and Negedine, and dear Droyagi, Tapshitaya, and draw Tuyagi, Nimichi, draw Tuya Chungurba. Then this year, Delia Droyagi, some dinner Mahobana, and Drag of ready, just Chunjura, Dine Zade, nearly Namazuki, Takajele, Dinimission, and Super Comigi in Sebig, Chamba that Sawa Comgi in Sebig, Tinchin As and Big. She's not done how to Kuma Kugu, Mare, Junshigo Mate, in a dang how to Luna using Shall never chigime, Kuma Kugume, Junshigime, Miss Simja, so chigime, Sampe, some of the Yuri Baina, and Kuma Kuye, again some Jikob, Rabene, the Gumare. Then some meva, then nigga some men, Kumoku, Gob Yabushane, Kedra, Beji Chimbochine, Kedra, or me time and the kid and the Abuduas and big Kedra. That was the Kulongi Pempatna, Sanyani, and the Spanish Chimbochaver.
Further point I want to make that the process of hearing and then reflecting on teachings serves for us to get to know ourselves very, very well. And as one comes to know oneself better, through this growing knowledge, our intelligence also has, we can utilize our intelligence better because of this growing knowledge. So one can see then, as one comes to get to know oneself well, that there are particular stimuli which trigger us. That there are certain people or certain circumstances in which we are very likely to come under the influence of the afflictions. The normal way of expressing it is we know there's certain people we don't like or certain things we have to do that we don't like. But one will whilst that is easily to recognize, subtler levels too, as we come to know ourselves, we will recognize. So here, utilize here the way to deal with this, the way to utilize this knowledge is to prepare well. So just like in your own life, one will prepare well for events that you are likely to encounter, do so here. So if you know you're going to be in a situation where one is likely to get angry, or likely to get desirous, in other words, or for example, insisting on things going your own way, or likely for pride to arise, whatever it may be, in your meditation prior to that, role play, work through what you expect to encounter, and prepare your mind how to deal with this skillfully. So here, you're preparing, you're establishing skill before you encounter what you know is likely to encounter. And if you don't that day, you probably will the next. And in this way, because you've prepared well, you'll be much better prepared to deal with that situation skillfully. So where I've experience of this, it's quite a different experience, but it comes down to the importance of preparing one's mind. So in our Buddhist context, we talk about motivation. So in the distant past, when alarms weren't widely available, clocks and the like weren't widely available, but one knew the next morning one had to get up earlier than usual, one had to, the night before, establish the motivation. Tomorrow morning, I need to rise 2 hours earlier than usual. And then one would. If one forgot the night before, the next morning one would sleep through to one's usual wake-up time. But by establishing a clear motivation, one would wake up. So likewise, when one goes to bed, one can set the motivation. Tomorrow when I wake up, I will ensure I put it aside immediately, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, to do a reflection. Or perhaps even set the motivation, before I get out of bed tomorrow, I will lie here and I will do this meditation. In this way I know it will happen. So similarly, in your meditation itself, one sets the motivation. Today, I will not harm others. I will guard my mind and ensure that anger doesn't arise, attachment doesn't arise, pride doesn't arise. In this way, by setting one's motivation, that motivation will have an impact throughout the day. One may also set the motivation, I will ensure that whilst I'm reflecting on the Dharma now, this will not be the last time today. Whilst I'm going about my many activities, which I have great experience of, things I've done many times, and therefore do not need to think or concentrate on what I'm doing, at that time I will think about the Dharma. And in this way you set the motivation, and it means it's much more likely that one will do so throughout the day. Just like if you've got your heart set on going somewhere on holiday, if your heart is set on it, you'll make sure the causes that are required are accomplished, and you will enjoy a holiday at your chosen destination. And the last point to say here is in the meditation on ethics, where the vows that are for the non-ordained are not to kill, not to steal, not to lie, not to engage in sexual misconduct, not to take intoxicants. So some of these, maybe all of them you never do, but certainly some in general people don't do, lying and stealing and so forth. So here, don't make the mistake of thinking, oh, I don't do these, so there's no need in my meditation to make the commitment, I won't steal, I won't lie, for example. Because whilst one may be habituated to speaking honestly and to not taking what isn't yours, circumstances change, whether in this life, in an unexpected way, or in a future life. And therefore, by now strengthening these imprints that one has, not to steal, not to lie, when one's circumstances change, one will have a stronger commitment to remaining virtuous. So therefore, in brief, the point that's being made in this segment is that motivation is crucial. Establish the motivation that in any circumstance one will act ethically, stay under the influence of wholesome minds, not allowing the afflictions to overwhelm, to dominate, to guide one.
Adine Jeremje, Adine ya Sonshayu, Kewa Sabiki, Kewa Dungoachi, Ya Chegore. There are Damle, Sunam Gantupti, Giga Mitse, Duga Mipungwe, City Pulon Dubi, Lolone, Drogunchi, Gavi Tor shows.
Rinpoche Lama Tsongkhapa concludes his brief text with these verses of dedication. Due to whatever merit has been gained through this advice, may beings not be arrogant of our pleasures, nor discouraged at hardships. May minds be turned from the relentless activities of this one life, and may all migrators be nourished by delight in Dharma.
Deda damle sunam gantopti sideda jerim chegi nyelya deje sungshepa din madu susutini kom nyamlen dine din chegore shebi sungshepa geda sunam de partume ba sayore so dine sunam gangyoba di isor gantopti isor.
Look in the first line, due to whatever merit has been gained through this advice. So this is referring to the merit that we have all gained through hearing, as well as reflecting on this, as well he's referring to the merit that will be gained through our ongoing endeavors.
That Gigang Mitseng, Duga Mipunwes, Gigang Mitseng, the Anzol Karigosne, Des Lele, the Kibu Subu that they will send Kibu the Kapla, that Jidu Sembege back chick when Mombarushi, the Tixons, Jidu Sembe, some Daja, the chick, Gavin Yamlen chair down, and the Bendigo Maruaje. Tisandinism, and the Kiwu Yukablena, the Ludibo, the same Kiwina, the Tisha Sambegi, Pang Chingomba Cheja, and some Madubache, gave it our account to the true Kures, and Kika Misse. Duka Mifon, we see the young Galeshu Cap the Kabla, Tanga Galachi to some Maresana, Tanga did pay on some other same part to Duga. Mupumpas and a part Jowish have Yambas or a sim Yamba, Shumba, sir. Just a Ganga, Che, the Adanga, the Kaleduche to Samare, the Nigga that Yonsamare and begin the Nigga, by sim the Yamjo, Timajache, to Buddha Ganga Yopina, gauge the count of the two Koreas, that the genial Langantoke, Yamling Rimbashi, or what in the Jawasa. This was a Kibu Yudukaplana, this Lude, the same Kibu Yudukaplan, that Atisha, some big, that you were Dashana, who minister, some Madaje, Mahobana, the Nayaki, Tonale, Yamlik Rimba the two Koreas. Takanga, that the Nig Dubu Yudukapla, Danga, Chitu Samara, Benga, Joe, and I sing Mindunga, Yonsa, Marasan, big same Shumji, in a major budget, and Delia. Povaki, Adangi didn't chair, Cops over it, the Nick Jiggy Sebege, then at the Christian Subian the Jawara said, the Nigga Ganga Yuduka, Sebocom was a suitable Sim, much of a suitable was said, Chesandiniza, the Nigit Holia, and the Nichia, Cobra, Diring Madoshan, Cobra, Cobra, the Nich Magenta, Nakale, how the Shash and the Timari, and be sometimes, and to Mutuche, Gang to Yamnacha or Esem, Gigan, Mr. Dugan, Mipon, we said.
And the second line, so I'll just change one word in this. May beings not be content about pleasures, nor discouraged at hardships. So this line refers to the practice of patience, the practice that I mentioned earlier about transforming problems onto the path or into the path. So we are in danger both in terms of being deceived by pleasures and deceived by hardships. Both deceive us, in that they can lead to the arisal of afflictions. And it's the afflictions in relation to pleasures or hardships that deceive us. So if our practice is going well and our mind is in a good place and our material circumstances, our health are all good, it's very easy to become complacent. So this then is the meaning of guarding against becoming complacent, is the meaning of may beings not be content about pleasures. In particular, so not only in relation to our material circumstances and our health, but in particular in relation to our spiritual practice. When one's mind is in a good place, happy, at ease, it's very easy to become self-satisfied. And there are two grave dangers here. One, through becoming complacent, through being content, over-content, but being complacent, we will not apply ourselves with sufficient vigor to our training because of the complacency, is one danger. And the second is, instead of feeling closer towards others, ever more loving and tender towards them, it's quite possible we'll feel distant or even dismissive of them and their suffering, thinking, if only they did what I'm doing, they would be okay like I am. So here, one has been deceived by one's afflictions. This is the danger of being content or arrogant about pleasures. And so too with discouraged at hardships, where due to outer or inner circumstances, one feels this is too hard, particularly training my mind, hearing teachings, reflecting on the teachings. It's too difficult. I have all these other things that are more important. This is not for me right now. So here too, there's been an arisal. In this sense, it's less likely to be of the class of attachments, maybe more likely to be that of anger, and we push away the possibility to transform these hardships into the path. And the method for doing so is, as mentioned earlier, any of these trainings, in particular patience, accompanied by compassion or by wisdom or the reflection on impermanence, which would serve to remind us, my life is impermanent, this incredible opportunity I have is ending. Whilst I'm seeing progress in my spiritual development, don't be complacent. Continue to strengthen virtuous minds. Or on the other hand, don't allow mere temporary hardships to overwhelm me. Rather, I can transform this by generating the understanding of impermanence or compassion or wisdom, and thereby transform hardships too. So that then is the meaning of the second line. May beings not be complacent or content about pleasures, nor discouraged at hardships.
Dandala nga zuge lu dewa sem dewo ane lu dewa an kiwu chungbe ne re ane jige lu da sem de kangar chungbe ne pa nyamlen jige rimba de pa zam ma sha wa je mudu ni je wu re se wu da dandala.
Because the meaning in brief is to transform our minds, we need to train repeatedly over a sustained period, not take our foot off the accelerator when things are going well, not to completely abandon it when things are going hard. No matter what we encounter, whether it's pleasure arising or suffering arising, we need to continue.
Tadene cedi bembun cedi bunlong dube lo ne sede da cedi bunlong dube lo ne sede da ngan cedi le bunlong sede sang sing si gore 제상은 제대리에 상승이다 지게 레가나 남미야나 망고 주여버자 디네자 데니게 남미야와 지지네 아주 지 상승이 남미의 세디점이 자올파기 고고르체 아니 최념는 제한테 용거 말해서 제상 데니게 바 상승이다 안 세디점이 자와 상승들라 지금 마땅하지 아니 저기 계절 냠는 제한테 로로네서 데니게 로파파 로제 저기 냠는 제한에 계절 강투도 두고야 돼 두고 그래서 그래.
And this is emphasized too in the third line. May minds be turned from the relentless activities of this one life. This ties in very closely to what was looked at earlier, as well as the line immediately above this. Our lives are busy. There are relentless activities that we feel compelled to engage in. We need to look at this. We need to look at these relentless activities. Are they really necessary? Do they accord with what we hold as valuable? In this way, we use our wisdom, use our intelligence to turn away from the relentless activities of this life through seeing their value in a broader context, and thereby let them go.
단에는 조군 주의 가외 초월쇼 쓰는 조심제 탐제 안데시 셰바 나신 주의 냠len 제제는 류대와 셈라 가데 용하다 제텔레이나 데니 용하다 마오바나야네 데니기 안데 띵게 대와 톱투비게 안 데니게 냠len 제네 안데 초월쇼는 데니게 네버쇼 쇼스고로 초월쇼스 냠len 제 투벌쇼스고르다.
The final line, may all beings be nourished by delight in the Dharma. And it ends with the text ends with a reminder that the entire purpose of training is to spiritually develop so that we can be of ever more benefit to others. So we dedicate here, may all the temporary needs of beings be fulfilled. May they abide in physical and mental happiness. And not only may their temporary needs be fulfilled, but may they take delight in the Dharma and thereby cultivate the causes that will lead to the ultimate, the highest form of happiness, of enlightenment.
다 돈다라 직뒤샤베 직돈다 도르뒤슈베네 돈다 가르송하는데 다 제름 치게 되니마 최송셰베게 쇠넘사바기 디게 쇠넘딜라 되네 다 체델이야 조가 심전 탐제 안지가서 상한싱다 남미야다 데니게 요상왕도 송아제 계주주비게 바 로디게 바 상한싱 소에 마중와제 안에 기부주나다 누구시로나다 기도 가르치오베네 안 대시기 되네 강알이야 제르미 지기 냠링이 림바 송샤기 되게 된 냠len 제제 안 좋았음제 탐제 냠len 제제 안 체딜이나 디기다 인께와 치마이네 아니 디기 줍투베기 안데 되네 귤규와 쇼세데 당와 두스레다.
summarize the meaning of this text, Rinpoche Lama Tsongkhapa's intent was to encourage us to recognize this incredible opportunity that we have, but that it is fragile, and to use what remains of it well by focusing our mind on the accumulation of virtue, which again means all these various meditations, to at all times keep our mind under the influence of, for example, understanding of impermanence, understanding of love, compassion, and so forth. This is how we use what remains of this life, accumulating virtue, and thereby, first initially to make this possible, and then with ever further ease as we cultivate these minds within us, turn away from the meaningless affairs of this life, these meaningless activities that so consume our time and our energy. And whilst going through this process, developing an ever more sincere wish to be of great benefit to all beings without exception.
Della Kushasa Kanda Tungan Jasu Chiluga, Deda Ngay Chaloshi, Lapshin Damcha Shisu Juzibe, Zedem Madi Shepki Chugine, Gangi Guibe, Chiwi Rapchu Bas, Yada Dene, on the Depart Sine, Tishene Tuptare.
Thank you. I've now concluded the presentation on this text, and for auspiciousness, I've read the title and the first few verses so that in the future, once again, you may encounter this text. You, in coming to this retreat, all made the conscious decision, because I don't assume anyone was forced to come, you made the conscious decision to come here to hear about the Buddha Dharma, hear about how to transform one's mind and attain lasting happiness. And through your endeavors here, receiving the teachings and meditating on them, all of us have accumulated vast stores of merit, me too, because due to you coming here, I once again read this text, reflected on its meaning, and got the opportunity to try and present it to you. So all of us had an incredible opportunity to cultivate virtue.
Chikasada Dili Sheba Najing on the Yamlegi Rimba Samdana Rimba de Pashevadi, Tanga Lalen Tayadi, Ninga to Chewa de Diris.
And there's entire presentation of trainings that one has encountered here. Then once again, the encouragement is that one engages in these repeatedly over a sustained period, because that is the method to transform one's mind.
And the Mase, that can do it at Samunalia, and the Chimon Banana, or the Denmark, Joy Jodi Cabrina, Dam Gitina, or the Niki and the Sam Duaji, Copra, some Pay, Abuchunso, some Biggie, that the Niki, Chike, and the Abuchunso, some Biggie, Yane, Yamdu, Gawati, Chisu Iran. And the Sosora, Miss Sosora, some Davin, Sosugi, down some Digo Robotchik, and the Niki, Yam the Dukan, Bema, or Disus. Jitine some Yakude, Yakura, Conzo Yakushu, Yakushu, Conzo Yakushu, and big Shangy Conzucheva, the Chisu Iranchea. And the Yajika, the some jiggy, Demi, Jig and the Tevere, and the men began on to get Chusoga, the Delia, Derijikan, Genzi, that the end of the Conchasanga, Conzu, Derijan, Marcoticia, that Derija Bear, Yakucho, the Negi, Yakanto Koho, Yakushu, Jason, and big, the Natolia Conzulia. Chicheva de Gichisuja, Soso Jesu Yinacheda, Momba in there, and you get in the Kang to Jigia, Sampike, Dushin, some Tavena, and you Gewa, and then Gela Jesu Iran, Chodo, Marchim Chigi, Shen, Rangi Gewa Jeba, the Shenji Gewa Jebale, Jesu Iran Jebana, 개와 빼마서 개침을 싸기로 해서 송고를 되네자 되네기 최소이라 해야 돼 빼마서 개침을 해.
End with talking briefly about a skillful practice that Lama Tsongkhapa encouraged his students to engage in, which is that of rejoicing. Rejoicing in the virtue that they themselves as well as others has accumulated. Because this mind of delighting in virtue, this serves to both multiply the virtue and make it so much more likely that one will continue to engage in such virtue. So now I encourage you to rejoice in your own decision to come here, rejoice in your own causes that were accumulated prior to coming here that enabled you to come here. Because you're coming here, and your wish, or to express it like this, your wish to hear about these teachings and to integrate them through meditation, that wish only came about in dependence on causes you had accumulated. Therefore, rejoice in that and rejoice in the result of those causes that you were able to spend these days here, hearing teachings and being guided in them. And moreover, this is not the case for only one individual, but is the case for everyone here. We all accumulated particular causes that led to this outcome. So rejoice also in others, in their virtuous causes they've accumulated, that brought us here, and the virtue that has been accumulated whilst we are here. And moreover, to the extent that one has come to understand the importance of hearing teachings and reflecting on the meaning repeatedly over a sustained period, rejoice in this knowledge, rejoice in the experience you've had of integrating these teachings within oneself, and thereby commit to doing one's best, to have a daily meditation practice, to recall these teachings repeatedly throughout the day, and to rejoin us here or elsewhere to receive further teachings, engage in further retreats. Because again, by reflecting or by rejoicing on what has been achieved here now and setting the motivation that one will continue to do so as well as to regather, it makes it so much more likely that what will happen, as well as the virtue itself being strengthened. And then lastly, each of you acknowledge the many people who made this retreat possible. This retreat being possible was dependent on each of you coming here, your fellow retreatants, on many causes accumulated over the past, which are largely unseen to us, by specific individuals who have enabled this Dharma center to be here, as well as those that you are directly aware of, such as Andy, who was a major cause of everything coming together, certainly Tsepel, who held everything here together with her meditations and guidance, and Dream 2, and many other people. I personally don't know who's all involved, I just know a handful. So from my side, a sincere thank you to all of you, but please do rejoice in the endeavors of everyone who made this opportunity possible.
다 점리나리아 안지 미네바 안지 강아슈 체되겐다 배 바우메바 다 점린 가제칼레 안지 강아주 밀리아 이치 가신 맹가나라 가신 맹가나메바 낭디와 되게 안디 멤비기 둔조 나자 네바 강아 냠다 로고메 디니게 망보슈 지여루와 안데니게레 안 라바도 계신데디 대대한 주기데 두와 대경 서브름치 십시도 로자데 안데스티와 직답견 쇼스 되네 강아 체샤시도 되네 자디야 지게 첨부 되네 장아주 샘전 탐제다 되네게 샘진나야 네바 냠다 간에슈베네 지수차자 menju에 야공한주 아주게 개와 40에 개와디기 뉴바딜에 때네 아니 menju에 야고 용하다 네당 조와 네려저 샘전 탐제 류대와다 안심 기비기 용하다 아니 샘전 탐제라 잠지게 삼로디 공원이고도 펴와 폐위기 규르규와 쇼세지 나도시는 말람지 캡르와다.
In a few moments we'll come to reciting the prayers, the dedication prayers. So whilst you do so, the process of dedication isn't so dependent on the recitation of the words, but rather your mental engagement with the meaning of the words. So here I encourage you to whilst we are dedicating, to generate the following thoughts. In particular, that all the remarkable spiritual teachers in this world, in particular His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, all those that we have spiritual connection with, as well as all those who are leading beings in the cultivation of virtue, may they all have long lives, remaining amongst beings, and skillfully, so as to be able to skillfully continue to guide beings. And may all their aspirations be quickly fulfilled. Moreover, may all beings who are in pain and discomfort, whether physical pain or mental unhappiness, may all beings be freed of such pain. And where you know of people in this situation, call them to mind, and call them to mind as representatives of all beings. For example, Lama Zopa's attendant, Raja, he's in quite some pain because he fractured his hip, so he's in quite some pain. We've been asked to make prayers for him and dedicate for him. So you can call him to mind and all others that you know as representatives of all suffering mother beings. And then furthermore, dedicate that all virtuous qualities that abide on beings' minds, love, compassion, wisdom, and so forth, may these grow. May our world become more loving, more compassionate, and beings become wiser. So have these thoughts, generate these thoughts, and have them in mind whilst we recite the dedication prayers.
Andi mache dangang jige zamlina ya nem gi genje kanga ma o chue de kanga yore andi membige da sayum jaya da ani chulo chawa chushimo chulo jaya kanga de ya andi membige 가시나리아 지게 지금 막 초체제는 지게 도체네 강한 뭐지 유대 반사 다들 나서 개와디 뉴바 대학 뉴바 텔라 때네 안에 지게 다데 되니게 사염지 지바다 출로게 강하다 안에 지게 막초게 강하게 비셔서 내ям다 되는 차사 되게 강하 세제 샘제 탐제 되게 용화지다 안에 샘제 탐제 그래 편제 지지리야 잠바단 제외 냠내 야고 용화디 용어 쇼선 되니게 용어 규규와 쇼세 당아도 담아도 뭐가 되네 해야 돼.
And lastly, dedicate all this virtue so that the disaster that's unfolding of climate change, may all those causes be eradicated. May beings change their behavior sufficiently so that these natural disasters can be dissipated. And all the illness in the world, in particular the pandemic, which for those who are continuing to suffer or still will, may these and other illnesses come to an end. And may all warfare, as well as conflict, whether between nations, between communities, or between individuals, may this come to an end, by rather beings generating a tender and loving attitude towards others, treating others only with care and kindness. Thank you. Thank you all so much.